In video 1 of the Multiversus saga, we went over how and why the game launched to the state it's in, while I posed the question, is Multiversus beyond saving? Which I answered is probably, at the time, unlikely. I just think the game needed some substantial fixes and as fast as possible, and the game would be set in an okay direction at the cost of a slightly smaller fanbase. Video 2, we had some patches hit that I thought were overall a step in the right direction. However, I felt like Player First Games was approaching patches in a reactionary way, thus the Killer Instincts dev comparison. This video also briefly touched upon why I do not mess with the majority of the Multiversus fandom, as well with detailed reasons as to why. That last video I knew was going to get some heat, and my goal was to hopefully get some of the MVS fans to see there's players like me who, while we enjoy the game and what it offers, and truly want the best for Player First Games, we also are still a bit disgruntled and upset with the game's release, and constant minor nerfs and buffs are not quite the change we're looking for. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. If you look at the timeline, oh yeah, that's right. We got timestamps for this one, baby. This will be my final video on the Multiversus saga until we get some new patches or new characters that really warrant an update video of sorts. I want to dedicate this time into dissecting some of my very personal gripes I have with Multiversus gameplay systems, progression, and my overall thoughts on the game a month later. So join me as I take you all on one last ride through the little platform fighter that tried. Starting things off with the Contrary to the title of these videos, there is quite a lot to appreciate, and I feel like in my previous videos that got lost in the shuffle of critiques. So here goes a list of my favorite things Multiversus has done. The game oozes charm and personality. For starters, Multiversus has a really pleasing and unique art style, similar to Smash. I don't think this game gets enough credit in that department. They made Finn, Arya Stark, Marvin the Martian, and Jason Voorhees all look and make sense to each other side by side, despite having vastly varied art styles. I also love how the original character designs embrace those Saturday morning cartoon vibes. They all got crazy proportions that still fit their source material, but retain this excellent animated shading and comic book look that makes it feel like all the 2D charm easily leapt into the 3D space. The game's visuals and animation suite are a treat to the eyes, jam-packed with tons of references to pop culture and the source material each property stems from. The most underrated of these aspects are easily the addition of certain characters' crouch taunts, as I dub them. Because I mean, Bugs crouching down and digging through an Acme box and pulling out a sandwich is really good. Joker shuffling his deck of cards and being able to select that for his neutral attack, things like that really put a lot of personality into each fighter, and I love it. The stages are also really pretty looking. Trophy's Edge is gorgeous, the court has a slick nighttime look, Sky Arena is really pretty and captures the Steven Universe world extraordinarily well, and my personal favorite, the Batcave, is just flat out raw. I do wish it was a tiny bit darker, but I understand that'd be hard to pull off for visibility reasons. The locales are really easy on the eyes most of the time, and I appreciate the restraint on busy background elements as it makes 2v2 boxing a lot easier. Speaking of accessibility features, huge shoutouts to the UI customization. Being able to have the traditional Smash scoreboard system is really nice for me as it's what I'm used to, so it makes things pretty easy to follow when it comes to tracking all of my opponents. I also could change the colors of the enemy team, which is great as I'm red colorblind, so it's nice to be able to set the enemy team to purple, making it easier for me to track them. Couple that with the excellent suite of customizable control scheme options that have recently been enhanced via this update, it all wraps up into an extraordinarily accessible experience. A lot of the variant skins are pretty neat. Sadly, I'll probably never buy them because the prices are way too high, which I'll cover a bit more in the negatives, but for the most part, I enjoy the aesthetic of a lot of the ones on display, and they do a great job of harkening back to some nostalgic elements of our past. Lastly, I'll give minor props to the training mode. It is really nice that they give you a bit of customizable ways to test combos and find out what's true and what's fake when you go for certain loops and strings. If I could go a bit further with the training mode, I would love to be able to have personalized settings, such as being able to set the AI to DI in and out, or have the player be able to pinpoint exactly where I want enemies to DI so I could test combos and things of that nature, and also a bit more improvement on the dodge after hit stun and dodge after recovery, things of that nature, so I could practice, say, edge guarding or knowing which combos are genuinely true. If that's too much to handle, then at the very least, please give us a recording and playback feature similar to traditional 2D fighting games. This segues us nicely into the gameplay, and I gotta say, to be honest, I've come around to the slower speed of the game. It makes it a lot easier for me to track what's going on in a 2v2 fight, and it also makes it, well, theoretically easier for me to space attacks and punish accordingly, and it kind of beats out people just swinging 24/7. Although I say all of that, but with this slower gameplay also comes a slew of other flaws, and they become a lot more prevalent, but we'll cover that in the complaint segment. Let's see. The Rift cutscenes are fire. I love the personality each character gets to showcase, and the interactions between the fighters is always a treat to see. Wish the dialogue was written a little bit better in the Rift instead of just everyone doing quick little quips and puns throughout the entire Rift journey. I guess my only other caveat is I really wish there was more cutscenes. Like, imagine a beach one during the Surf's Up event with everyone just having fun, no dialogue needed, like a silent film. And yeah, you know, the desyncs have gone down significantly as of this latest patch. I think that's a really good thing for twos, and it makes it so playing online hasn't been too frustrating. And well, yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the things I currently like about Multiversus. So during the process of making this video, Player First Games announced a huge mid-season patch. Their goals were to re-add missing beta features along with rebalance and recontextualize, honestly, a huge chunk of the cast. Since this video was going to be more gameplay oriented, I figured, let me take a step back and not publish a think piece on the gameplay of Multiversus, considering that the patch could radically change the game. Well, it's been about a week since that patch came out, and I've got some let's say hot takes on the current state of the game's meta. Before we dive in deep here, I have to emphasize that these are my own personal thoughts on the game's current state. No, I don't think all of my gameplay suggestions should be taken as gospel, and I'm not trying to tell the devs how to do their job. I am, however, a fighting game player who's been around the block for quite some time, and I am indicative of seeing certain patch cycle trends that can negatively affect the game in the long run, and we're already starting to see some of that seesaw-esque design in terms of the meta, where certain characters just randomly rise to prominence because of certain nerfs that, in all honesty, truthfully, weren't necessarily the right way to go about nerfing and buffing said characters. Now, if our thoughts line up, that's fantastic, but I want to emphasize, don't take my word as gospel and don't go spreading this stuff around, alright? This is just a public forum to openly discuss some of the flaws and positives with the overall balance and health of where the game's going to be going in the future. With that all out the way, gosh darn, the Rifts are the most mind-numbing set of challenges I've ever had the misfortune of playing, and MVS essentially baiting and forcing players into playing the mode for a chance at unlocking Agent Smith is still honestly sick work. To rehash a bit from my first Multiversus video, I still think time locking Rifts is a very bad idea. Rifts is the first mark against the game that adds on to this feeling of making everything in Multiversus feel like daily chores. They are extremely time consuming. Not only are there daily challenges that add to the chore-like grind, every single stage in the game has a laundry list of objectives that the player is forced to complete in order to level up gems. Then upon re-logging in day to day, you're forced to play those daily reward missions to keep increasing gem levels that are randomized by the loot box style unlock, which means yes, even if you grind really hard, there's going to be points where you're under leveled gem wise, and that can lead to a gatekeepy feeling to accessing new difficulties or low-key force you into that inevitable paywall. The TLDR is from the battle pass to the rifts to the gem unlocks, you must keep playing this game day in, day out, which normally wouldn't be a problem if the content of the rifts was any fun. The first three are fine. We got some fun break the target mini games, like crystal defense with the tank, which is just shooting drones on a horizontal plane. Then there's balloon blast, which is shooting balloons on a vertical plane. The Lazarus pit, which resurrects your character once from the bottom of the blast zone, which is later repeated again in the shark minigame, but I guess the shark just knocks you up. Some jump rope minigame. Also, I'm not a fan of the devs taking out being able to use Superman's taunt on the jump rope minigame. Low-key, not only was that a good accessibility option for people that might have difficulties with timing, it also just really cool gimmick that the community found, and they removed it because, you know, no fun allowed. There's also some gimmicky VHS filters over gameplay for the horror-oriented stages, a very slow volleyball minigame that has some of the floatiest and sluggish ball hit physics I've ever played. These modes are replayed throughout all 6 rifts. They are thrown in mainly for the sake of padding out the branching paths, which of course is the whole issue. Some branching paths or stages force you into playing a guest character to complete a certain quest, like Shaggy throwing enhanced sandwiches or Taz eating a bunch of watermelon Stevens, for example. However, strangely enough, when it comes to say graphic tee requirements, locked fighter requirements, or for the Megalido Shark Week required costumes, you'll still need to unlock these items to progress those parts of the rifts, which means if you aren't playing weekly or day to day or miss some of these free limited time items, you'll have to pay for them to unlock or progress certain rifts. And while yes, the rift requirements are lowered this season in terms of that cauldron gimmick, the gem XP grind is still very real. For the people that shout, the game is free, I will always always reinforce for now. Yes, great job to you for playing the game in beta and getting access to the battle pass and Jason and a slew of other tiny little bonus goodies. I am one of those people included. It makes playing the game in its current state a breeze. Next season, for those who might have spent Gleamium on anything other than the battle pass, or, you know, us in general on season 2, are gonna be in for a rude awakening once you realize just how vile and chore-like the grind is. Those people who didn't play in beta or are returning to the game that aren't massive mega fans or daily grinders are already tapping out due to how repetitive the rift structure is. Not to even mention the fact you have to replay these rifts upwards to 5 times while recompleting the same exact challenges in order to progress gem levels. This game's grind is not only insane, it's also just extraordinarily repetitive, and anyone who says otherwise is deluding themselves because they refuse to listen to reason. No person should have to redo the same exact task with next to no change 4+ times to have a crack at unlocking another fighter early. It really makes me question why they didn't just once again pull from the Sephiroth challenge and Smash Ultimate. Give us a super hard fight against Smith and the players that beat him get a badge and the fighter. Then make the Rift replay rewards their own separate thing per season. It's a fair fix in my opinion. You still keep the challenge, and if they really need to keep that daily comeback grind, they, I don't know, make it so we have to fight Agent Neo over the span of the week and there's 5 different difficulty tiers. You keep the grind, you keep the progression, and it fits with the theme of the Matrix because you could title the event something related to the clones of Neo. When you factor how repetitive the rifts are, both in terms of how often they repeat levels and how often you have to repeat challenges to further progress gems, while coupling that with the constant weekly sponsored shill events and dailies, then you have the weekly grind. It quickly turns into less of a fun fighting game with unique and creative mission types and more into an Excel spreadsheet you're logging in to complete. I don't hate the rifts completely. I genuinely like the idea of them. I just think they're way too long, offer little to no replay value due to their length, and are confusing in terms of progression. I mean, no, seriously, why offer guest characters and paywalled content while both being in certain branching paths? It just doesn't make sense. And finally, the biggest pet peeve for me when it comes to mission types and questing. Dog, I'm just not trying to play some of these characters. I don't want to log into rifts, free-for-all, or 1s and 2s just to hit a Rick and Morty neutral attack 14 times. Okay, so rifts are still a bust after a week of waiting, and to me, they haven't really gotten any better. If anything, they've gotten much worse. Well, this patch must have at least really fixed some of my game. I'm gonna keep it 100% with you. It was kicking in prior to this patch, but it's been solidified with the changes they've made recently. I think I've fallen out of love with Multiversus. The reasons why are multi-layered. We've already covered my issues with the Rift PvE content and the daily grind associated with it. I've also discussed many of my issues with the microtransactions in previous videos, so I'll avoid that topic so we don't beat a dead horse, which means I gotta talk about game feel. Multiversus, even with the new input buffer timing change, just feels bad to play. In other platform titles such as the Smash series, both Melee and Ultimate, Rivals of Aether, heck even the ill-fated Nick All-Star Brawl 1 and 2, the moment-to-moment neutral is engaging. Melee has movement options I love, performing wave dashes, L-canceling, wave lands, and a slew of other movement options that are fluid and require a human touch that makes the act of gliding through the battlefield intricate and diverse depending on player to player. In games like Ultimate, the mechanical input is much less demanding, but the core movement of the roster just feels great. There's genuine tactile weight classes you can feel while playing. Captain Falcon feels like this speedy midweight, however he is packing serious untapped power and you feel it in the sweet spot of attacks like Knee and Spike. Lightweights like Sheik and Fox feel effortless, like you're gliding through the air on cruise control as you dish out these devastating stings that lead into taking an explosive stock. But hey, maybe it's unfair to compare a AAA game like Multiversus to the king of platform fighters. Okay, bet. I'll compare it to some other indie titles, like Slap City. I'm not joking when I say Slap City is my all-time favorite platform fighter. The movement is mad crispy, we got a ton of melee-style movement options, and unique additions such as SC's clutch button. This allows you to reverse the horizontal momentum on key actions such as air strong attacks, dash cancels, reverse moonwalking, and so much more. Don't forget the fact that the game runs at a buttery smooth 120 FPS, and I think the most underrated aspect of the title is how each character feels incredibly refreshing. There's some slight nods to Smash in the roster, but truthfully, every character is their own creative thing. My main is Frolin. They are a resource-light character who relies on extremely high execution to weave in and out of combo states. All of her strong attacks use some form of explosive pills that must be reloaded after 3 uses. Couple that with her tricky moveset that revolves around her scalpel edge guards, and you could quickly see how Slap City is a never-ending fun platform fighter. My partner mains Business Casual Man, who spends the whole game building up his funds by getting attacks in and then using his smash attacks for potential cash outs. When those cash outs are landed, they do insane crit damage, and more often than not, it leads to a destroyed stock. Every character in this game has some unique or shockingly innovative moveset for a platform fighter, which is why I often come back to it. Oh, right, this is a video on Multiversus. Okay, point is, look at these games. What do they have in common? If you answered slick movement options that are only discovered at the mercy of the player's capabilities, you'd be right. Yes, even titles like Nick All-Star Brawl are still really fun for me because the core moment-to-moment combat is a lot more entertaining and freeform, both in terms of moving from ground to air and vice versa, and in terms of how crazy combos can get during combat. I mean, for crying out loud, NASB 2 features the slime mechanic in a Guilty Gear style burst, and not to mention the slime is basically roaming cancel or rapid for my Blaze Blue homies, and allows you to cancel moves into other moves, which gives you some really nasty combos. These games are mad fun, and even when I'm hit with some dumb stuff, I can't ever get too upset because these games offer something Multiversus as of now feels like it can only dream of. Hitbox viewers. Basically a feature of the game that tells me when a move is active, how far it can hit, and where the hurt box is so I can land a cheeky punish. Aside from Smash, to get this in Smash you gotta mod it or use a website, but the point is somewhere out there they are shown. Slick movement, most hidden hurt boxes make sense, fun stages, and rewarding gameplay either in competitive modes or single player modes. It's because of a combination of these factors that I return to these games quite often with my friend group. Multiversus in its current state features very little of what I personally want out of a platform fighter. Like, sure, a majority of the animations and movesets on display look good, but the hitboxes and hurt boxes absolutely to this day 3 betas later do not match up. So much to the point they spent an entire update basically fixing it and making it so Jason finally works as intended. Free to play game or not, this should not be an update that needs to be made in any fighting game, and that goes across the board for 2D games too. I've seen some jank-aw hitboxes in anime fighters, and it's not cool either. And while sure, I am glad that some moves are getting fixed, we now have to really take into consideration and amplify how many of these interactions, how many of these moves do not work upwards to 27 plus times across the cast. And I've gone through the footage, I've slowed it down, and there are so many, I mean so many times I've went to whiff punish attacks and either the aggressor gets to slip away scot-free because they have dodge meter, or the attack flat out goes through space-time. It'd be more annoying if it led to a loss, but no, the most infuriating part of it all is that it leaves the interaction meaningless, which means all the neutral hoops I had to jump through just to get a taste of landing an attack in this slow, sluggish game goes out of the window as my opponent dodges into the floor below and starts rolling and running around like a maniac. Just look at what happens in the world of ones with pro level matches. Skip around a match, pause at a random point, and tell me when someone isn't in gray burnout from either dodge attack boosting a move or just plain old running around fishing for an interaction. Currently, the 1v1 combat experience for me is even more miserable than it was during beta. I don't know if it's the increased hit stun that's forcing players to play more passive, or the fact that once you get hit in Multiversus, there's basically no escaping a string, but something has to change. So I'm gonna propose some fixes that could help Multiversus in the long run. And yes, some of these changes would be engine or system-wide sweeps. 1. Let's speed the darn game up. I'm not saying revert it back to beta speed, and I'm not asking for the game to be melee fast. However, traditional platform fighter movement would be nice. For starters, let's cut the nonsense. It was cute in beta, it ain't cute no more, especially with dash attacks being added. We need a walk and run cycle. With the addition of dash attacks, it's now more clunky than ever when it comes to the game's grounded state. It's why everyone is fleeing to the air for combat, and why players are often in burnout from dodge canceling attacks in the grounded state. Moving on the ground and landing on platforms just feels sticky and rigid, which leads into the active air-to-air also coming off quite stiff when you're in the middle of combat. That stiffness is also thanks to the air dodge system. It just feels fixed, you know, there's no fluidity in the air dodge, and vulnerability on the air dodge either feels like it's way too short or it lasts way longer than expected. That or moves also have lingering hitboxes, but one of these two issues has to give out. A good fix for this would be to allow air dodges to interact with the stages and platforms more freely. Yes, this would mean adding ledge dashes, wave dashes, and whatever else floats the melee boat, but trust me on this one, in the long run with new features I'm proposing, it's gonna be for the better. The new system would raise some good questions like, do we have to ditch the cooldown on dodges? My answer to that is simple. We don't need to kill the cooldown system completely, rather, we retool what the dodge cooldown could be. Put a quick pin in that for now. I want to go over the dodge system. Since we're going to be adding wave dashes, ledge dashing, wave landing on platforms, and much more, we will need to overhaul how recoveries work. Currently, getting back on stage is a bit of a cakewalk. Not only do a lot of characters have overtuned up specials that are usually disjointed, making contesting them difficult, spikes and down airs are genuinely weak filling. Mixing that with how easy it is for you to hug the side of the stage and slip away if anyone pushes you, and yeah, we got a game where staying on stage and waiting for people to return is usually for the best. So we gotta punish ledge stalling, and this new system is gonna be a great step forward. For the wall, we're gonna mix in some systems, a little bit of rivals and a little bit of multiverses. I'm thinking you get 3 jumps off the wall, a air dodge to reset one of those jumps, and upon using your up special and then touching a wall, you're replenished upwards to 2 jumps. This system should keep ledge hogging down to a minimum while keeping what makes the ledge dance of multiverses engaging. And upon after using all of your resources, when you go to touch that wall, you're hit with wall fatigue and you slide down relatively quickly, making it so that you still have a chance at recovering and you still can do your up B and make an attempt to get back to stage. You just have to be more cautious about all the resources you're expending to make your way back to stage. Oh right, what about the dodge cooldowns, I hear some of you asking? Well, have no fear. They will now come into play with dodge cancelable moves. Same bar length that we have currently in Multiversus, but they're mainly going to be used for overextending off stage for an edge guard or chasing for a ladder combo. And there's going to be a couple more special surprises I'll reveal as we work our way through the reworks. Not only is this new system going to make ones a lot more entertaining and hopefully will help out stages feeling more dynamic to play on, it also should make twos a lot more thoughtful instead of the aerial whack-a-mole fest it currently is. Number 2. Combat needs a rework. Please fix jabs. In traditional fighters like Street Fighter or Guilty Gear, it makes sense that your quick, low committal move gives you access to powerful tools like Ken's jab into DP, for example, in Street Fighter 6. That being said, there's a reason why it's like that in traditional fighting games and not so much platform fighters. As an example, Mario's jab in Smash Ultimate doesn't start chaining into up tilt and giving him a free ladder. Jabs are more committal in those games, get off of me to a burst option, so to speak. Not necessarily something you do to start a combo or get some aggression started. Moving forward, jabs are going to be set in stone committal moves. You won't be able to freeform and interrupt them midway anymore, at least not without the help of that handy cooldown meter we mentioned earlier. That's right, at the cost of around 3 bars on a grounded attack, you'll be able to cancel any hit for a combo opportunity. The lingering hit stun will depend on how much damage you've racked up on your opponent. So if someone's at say 94%, they'll fall at that cancel relatively early to prevent potential infinites or checkmate situations, but I truly think this will be a happy middle ground in keeping what makes jabs fun in the current meta and incentivize players to get a bit more creative when it comes to chasing opponents down, and hopefully it will allow for more creative combos and juggle opportunities. As a side note, I think PFG should experiment with buffing both grounded and aerial down attacks across the board, as players will probably want to use them as a form of pop-up tool similar to how down tilts and smash work, which will allow for some aerial chases or combo starters. Some of these moves would need a rework, so things like Harley charging her slide and sliding across the screen wouldn't really need to exist with our new movement options. So instead, we could just have it so she does her down sweep that pops the player up and can either kick them away or lead into an up tilt. I think things like that should help a ton in making combat feel a lot more fresh and unique. Number 3. Please fix the hurtboxes player first games. There's nothing else that needs to be said. Either add a hitbox visualizer so I can feel less bad about the stuff I'm getting hit by, or start reworking how hidden hurtboxes function. Also, and again this is personal opinion, but I think the game needs a huge rework on how attack priority works. For those who don't know, attack priority varies from fighting game to fighting game. In platform fighters and anime fighting game titles, you'll see this come up a ton, like when 2 jabs collide and you get a clash or clink sound effect as the moves bounce off each other. Multiversus is in desperate need of a system similar to this, on top of massive sweeping hitboxes and hurtbox adjustments. As of right now, part of why the game feels so random to many is due to the attack system. There doesn't feel like there's a rhyme or reason as to why certain moves trade, beat out, or phase through people, the whole 9 yards. If anything needs to be implemented first, it's this right here. As for hitboxes and hurtboxes, I wish I could dive deep into the files and take a look at them and pinpoint why they feel so rough to go up against, or at the very least why the game should offer some visualization options, but of course there are none. And with how cease and desist happy WB has been during the brief modding period that was the Multiversus beta, it's fair to say we won't be seeing any of these tools or leaks come out anytime soon. Side note, companies blocking mods is lame. It'll always be lame. Cosmetic mods are cool and they do more benefit to players coming back to the game than harm. All I'm saying is modders will definitely add cooler things to the game costume wise than a shark hat on top of everyone's head. That's for darn sure. Finally, and this is my biggest request and arguably the hardest engine change, we gotta address the cooldown moves. I'm not saying to get rid of them completely, but we do need something else in their place when we are on cooldown with characters. Having a part of your moveset just wither away collecting dust for upwards to 30 seconds is just not good in any fighting game. And listen, I'm not completely against cooldowns. I've dealt with them in the past with titles like Grand Blue Fantasy vs Rising. Your Fireball, your Dragon Punch, your charge moves, they could all be put on a cooldown depending on which action is performed. The difference is those cooldowns never lasted nearly as long as they do in Multiversus. In Multiversus, it just slows the game down and it makes it feel like a chunk of your kit is kind of locked off until this timer is done. I truly think this is the biggest reason as to why casual players are turned away by Multiversus. When you lock a character like Superman, you'll want to do Superman things. Spam those laser eyes, fly and grab people often. Limiting that to uses and a recharge is just unintuitive. I think the happy middle ground would be to keep the cooldowns, and while the moves are recharging, you could do a less powerful, weaker version of said move, or just an alternate move altogether. My nuclear option would be to replace the cooldown moves altogether with something that's a bit more in line with the character that doesn't need a timer, but I digress. The changes I propose would benefit 2s and 1s as modes and should alleviate the sluggish and slow gameplay that's currently plaguing the title. Sadly, this would take massive reworks to Multiversus engine. Originally, I had a whole detailed section here going into every individual character and things I'd like to change about them, but after recording and listening to it back as I was getting ready to edit the video you're watching right now, I quickly realized, what's the point? Player First Games is going to make some sweeping changes in Season 2 that either heavily skew the meta in some seesaw way, nerfing what makes the top tiers fun to play so they can make room for an even more annoying future set of top tiers, who by the way have had active complaints but go unheard over the sea of downplaying. It's just not my forte to go into every individual character here and start offering changes, as I'm either going to get stuff wrong or I'm going to get told to get good by people, or they're going to take my word as gospel when I maybe don't know what I'm talking about with the said character and spread it around through various social channels. This leads me into my next problem, which is I feel like everything PFG does is strictly for the most die-hard fans of Multiversus. And not to be a Steam chart Nancy or a PS top game glazer, but we're kind of approaching critical mass and I don't think packing the game full of fan favorites will be enough to save it. Since I'm slightly in community talk here, let me speak on these fellas one final time. I understand this is probably a majority of people's first fighting game, but we gotta stop huffing the copium and throwing up protector shields when people criticize the game or get defensive when people joke online about wanting the game to die out. While you and obviously thousands of others enjoy the game, it's mad unfair to the people who played during beta, got burnt when it went offline, came back, gave it an honest shot, and are now on full hater mode because they essentially got tricked twice. It's honestly a reasonable response to see. I'm not here to say the game is dying. I'm sure those console numbers are definitely high, but are they high enough for Warner Brothers, which has been our biggest fear this entire time? We already see the likes of Suicide Squad is probably going to get its plugs pulled relatively soon. I mean, that game's literally free on Prime Gaming as of the recording of this video. We gotta be realistic here. This game for the average player has a slew of problems. The MTX grind is asinine, the rifts are mind-numbing, the chores on chores on chores, that is the missions and challenges, blows, the events leave a lot to be desired, the grind to unlock fighters as a starting out player, not one that played during beta, is unbearable, and there's still zero discussions on local support for this game in terms of characters and perks unlocks. The damage among the casual crowd is yet another permanent stain, and just like when Season 2 dropped for the last beta of Multiversus, I fear we're going to be in a spot where even if fan favorites like Ben 10 or Robin from Teen Titans come back, it wouldn't work because they'd very quickly see how flawed and unfun the overall game is, let alone the gargantuan grind it's going to take to just unlock them for the average new player. All of these issues are deep-rooted problems, and unfortunately I don't think I can try to convince the fandom to see past reason in that regard, which makes sense considering a majority of the players that logged in on launch were already people who played Multiversus back in beta. I've barely seen any new players talk about this game, and it's probably because they got gatekept by the grind so early. So unless Season 2 is offering a set of sweeping engine-wide mechanical changes, a ton of old perks coming back into the limelight, and a steady stream of interesting events with varied costumes that don't feel Fisher Price or sponsored, along with a bunch of bug fixes and hidden hurtbox adjustments, and new characters that fans actually want, not movie tie-ins. By the way, before we see someone like Beetlejuice, because they have new movies coming out this year, if they mix that with the grind of the game that is substantially easier to access for the average new player, then maybe, just maybe, Multiversus will be saved from getting cooked. I don't want to keep playing the waiting game and deal with the constant patch cycle nonsense in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, Multiversus will finally meet my expectations. I'm simply just gonna say GG, we go next and move on to games that don't frustrate me to no end. Best of luck to everyone out there having a blast grinding and playing Multiversus. Keep up the good times, but I'm out, and I wish you all the best. Thank you guys so much for watching the Multiversus is Beyond Saving saga. My next video is going to be on the entire history of tag fighting games, mainly their mechanics, okay, but it's going to be a very interesting romp, and we got a lot of cool stuff coming up soon. Thank you guys for coming out. I wish you all the best. Please take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys next time.